All right, again, my apologies. Welcome to today's webinar, How Community Organizations Can Better Partner with Businesses, presented by Disability Solutions. A few items before we begin. In order to reduce background noise, all participants are on mute. If you would like to use closed captioning during this presentation, our partners at Purple Communications will be providing them today. Simply hover over the menu button, hit that CC button, and you will see those appear on the bottom of your screen. With all that said, let's get started. All right, so my name is Kevin McCluskey. I'm on your left, and I am the Director of Partnership Development with Disability Solutions. On your right-hand side is Keith Meadows. He is the Hiring and Engagement Consultant. Although we have different titles, we do much of the same work. We're responsible for developing and managing talent partners to meet the hiring goals of our employer clients. We also work closely with employers to educate them on the benefits of hiring talent with disabilities and providing tools to help them best engage and support potential and current employees with disabilities. And lastly, we also work with job seekers with disabilities on improving their job seeking, application, and interview skills through some of our webinars, mock interviews, and one-on-one work. So as you can see on the bottom right-hand corner, we are Disability Solutions at Ability Beyond. That is our parent company. Ability Beyond is a nonprofit. It's based out of Connecticut and New York and has provided services to individuals with disabilities for over 60 years. Disability Solutions is a consulting arm of Ability Beyond. And it was really created to help employers implement successful initiatives to attract, hire, and retain talent with all types of disabilities. Our clients across the country include the Gold Award winner of Disability Inclusion, Pepsi, Centerpoint Energy, Synchrony, Bank of America, and many, many more on your screen. Our motto is changing minds and changing lives. We like to change the minds of employers through education, success stories, and proven methods, which then results in changing lives of job seekers with disabilities, turning into successful employees working for our clients. Whether you're a job seeker with a disability or a community organization working with job seekers with disabilities, we encourage you to visit our Career Center at disabilitysolutionstalent.org. There are hundreds of thousands of jobs available nationwide, including all the companies that we work with. Job seekers can sign up for a free account, have alerts sent notifying them of new jobs in their area. Partners can do that as well. Job seekers can also choose to upload their resume, or they can remain anonymous in their search if they wish. We definitely encourage you to check it out. And if you're a partner who's not receiving any of our job alerts, please contact us after the presentation. All right, so let's get to the agenda for today. We plan on walking you through a few topics to help you understand how to better interact with businesses to help you increase employment of disabilities. Basically, give you a few extra tools for your toolkit from experience we have working successfully with some employers across the country. We'll start with a brief history of employment services, touch on the corporate recruiting side, analyze the perspectives of the community organizations and the employers. We'll break down the most common problems and highlight some best practices you can take to be successful. So before we begin, and before we get into the reasons why employers and community organizations sometimes, speak different languages, we thought it's important to walk you through a brief history of disability employment for context. You'll see we have come a long way, but we still, again, have some more work to accomplish. All right, so way back in 1918, the Soldiers Rehab Act of 1918 began the movement towards more inclusive employment by changing the game a bit by instead of just providing money to those injured soldiers, really provided them with career training as well. This act really created the rehab world that we know right now, and specifically vocational rehab. It started for World War I soldiers, and it was expanded to non-soldiers in 1920 with physical disabilities, and expanded further in 1943 with World War II. Well, the Soldiers Rehab Act was essentially the start of disability employment. Things haven't always been 100% inclusive, and we recently have been in the charity model phase of disability employment. This phase hasn't been that long ago, so many of you might remember it. Still some things happening across the country. It actually, again, does still exist, and it does serve a valuable purpose in certain instances, but we want to expand your thinking beyond it right now. The charity model, possibly known as beg, place, and pray, that's where the job developer has a really nice, friendly individual with a disability who needs a job, and they meet someone at a company and kind of beg them to hire that person, not for a competitive role, maybe for a competitive role, but to create or maybe job carve a very token role. Then they just pray that it all works out and the person is hired. We have no issues with any person with disability gaining employment, but there are a few problems with this model we've seen in the past. Sometimes the job developer and the individual have no idea what the company does or what the job's all about, or if they can even do the job. Sometimes individuals didn't even know they had applied to that company because their job developer applied and submitted resumes for them. From the business ends of things, charity employment can create resentment amongst their other employees. Why does this person only have to get, a couple of things and only have all of these? It's a fact, right? It can make further disability employment challenging because staff get frustrated. This model can and has sometimes caused stigmas around people with disabilities when it comes to employment. But we're really now in the newest phase of disability employment, and one we hope continues to grow more inclusive. We call it WinWin Employment. You might know and be familiar with it as competitive employment. This type of employment, companies are still hiring the best person for the job. That person so happens to have a disability. And each of those hires need to meet the basic qualifications of the job, need to be able to perform the essential functions of the job with or without a reasonable accommodation. This is really a sweet spot for employers and individuals with disabilities. Employers are getting really great employees who can do the job that they need to perform, and also who come with a unique life perspective and experiences. Those hires with disabilities get an opportunity to showcase their talents on a level they may have not had before. And although there's plenty of work to do changing the minds of employers, understanding the talent of people with disabilities have, the progress has really been awesome. So more companies want to recruit people with disabilities, establishing employer research groups for those with disabilities. They're becoming more involved in the disability community, more than just a charitable or donation role, as well as training on disabilities for their teams, learning more and more. This is where we are now, and we need to grow and continue to nurture this seed. As company partners, you definitely have a role in holding these employers accountable for the words they say, the actions they say they'll make, and those pledges they put their names to. But we need to bring the right talent to the right job while continuing to learn and establishing both sides of the party and establishing those really nice partnerships and relationships. Keith, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. So diversity within this slide is very impactful for employers, and it's great information for you to know as well, so that it can help you further connect with them. Most employers try to increase diversity in general. They want to hire African Americans, Latinos, women, and also veterans. Guess what? Disability cuts across all of those groups. There is no group of people that is immune from disability. So by recruiting and hiring people with disabilities, a company is also able to help improve all of their diversity metrics as well. Most companies don't realize this, and they often think of disability recruiting or hiring as its own separate bucket. So you can use this to your advantage if you run into resistance with companies. It is also important to understand that any business that is a federal contractor, which a good percentage of businesses are, they're required to hire people with disabilities. Most companies struggle with this, and Section 503 of the Rehab Act of 1973 is a law that prohibits federal contractors and subcontractors from discriminating in employment against individuals with disabilities, and it requires employers to take affirmative action to recruit, hire, promote, and retain these individuals. Now, the current percentage required is 7% of each job group. So let's say there's a warehouse company and they hire forklift operators, shipping clerks, and truck drivers. So each of those job groups need to have 7% of those employees be people with disabilities. So if they have 100 forklift operators, 7 need to have checked the I have a disability box, either at the application or during the onboarding process. Not many companies get close to that number. And this is also great knowledge to have as you work towards helping people with disabilities get jobs. Sometimes company representatives will have no idea that they're a contractor and that they're required by law to hire people with disabilities. That's a bit scary, but it happens pretty frequently. Also, similar benchmark requirements are with VEVRA. Companies are also required to have between 6 to 7% of their workforce be veterans. 2 perspectives, 1 goal. We've seen this in our work here at Disability Solutions. We try to bridge that gap between community organizations that serve job seekers with disabilities and employers. The gap does sometimes seem incredibly wide, but it's important to realize that although community organizations and businesses usually do have 2 different perspectives, they usually share a few goals. Businesses, specifically the ones we work with, want to hire people with disabilities, and community organizations who work with job seekers with disabilities want to get their client or consumer placed in an organization where they can be successful long term. Let's look at the community organization perspective first. You serve the individual with a disability, and you also serve the agency that you work for. And thank you for all the good work that you do. Your goal is to help that individual get and maintain meaningful employment so that it helps them live as independently as possible, increases their happiness, and provides them with financial stability. You're a great advocate and guide, and hopefully you find a lot of great companies and you become a placements machine which earns your organization dollars. Businesses are a bit different, but understanding them will help you make lasting connections. They most obviously serve their customers and shareholders, but they are most focused on making money, and they do that in part by hiring great talent, reducing turnover, and making sure that they comply with regulations. That brings us to our common issue. So why don't community organizations and businesses make an unstoppable team if they both have a similar goal, which is hiring great people or finding employment for great people? Well, we've condensed these reasons into our top 4 here, and we'll walk you through them. As we mentioned, we usually operate as the bridge between the two parties. So all of this information came directly from our work with those parties. So our top 4 barriers. These are our top 4 barriers that we've seen between community organizations who want to help people with disabilities get hired and companies who want to hire people with disabilities. Communication, misunderstanding, lack of trust, and forgetting the big picture. Let's take communication first. It is essentially the most important part of any relationship, right? But there is usually different language used by each side. Community organizations refer to those with disabilities looking for work as maybe clients or consumers or something along those lines. Those may be easily understood within your organization, but businesses can become quite confused by that. To businesses, client or consumer usually means that another company is involved, so they may think that you're contracting out with another company, that you might be a middleman, and they might become hesitant in working with you based on this confusion. Your client or consumer to them is an applicant or a job seeker. Or many of you use the word placement to describe getting job seekers employment. Business, again, may have no idea what that means. Placement can sound a bit forceful and charitable. To businesses, the word is hire. Placement equals hire. And making that change can help that first connection with businesses. Another communication issue is that even though many businesses are more inclusive than ever before, many sometimes don't know the right words to use when talking about disability. They may use words that are more charitable in nature than the person-first language many of us prefer. Terms like the disabled, especially challenged, differently abled. When making connections, you can lead with that person-first language and make them more comfortable so they can respond in kind. And believe it or not, sometimes companies will avoid reaching out to community organizations because they are afraid of the right words to use, or they're afraid of using the wrong words, what they view as the wrong words. You can also go wrong with communication by the absence of it. And what we mean by that is, maybe you reach out by email and never hear anything back, or maybe the company reaches out to your organization and doesn't get a response. Not receiving a response kicks in the sometimes stubborn response on either side of, you know what, I don't need them. And usually the lack of response isn't intentional. Maybe the business contacted the wrong person, or maybe somebody out on leave, or they didn't respond promptly to your email because they were too busy, or conversely, maybe the community organization didn't respond to the business's outreach at times. Whatever the scenario, both sides sometimes give up a bit too easily because of hurt pride. So we encourage both sides to keep trying until there is a great connection and you are able to understand each other's businesses so that these disconnects do not happen. Another big gap between community organizations and businesses revolves around the lack of information and misunderstandings. Put simply, businesses usually have no idea what you do, and many times you may not understand what they do exactly. Before making a connection with someone in human resources or talent acquisition at a company, which are great contacts to make, by the way, just do that initial Google research, as we call it. You don't need to know the company's entire history, but knowing what they make or do and what kind of positions that they currently have posted can help you get past the initial conversations with those HR and talent acquisition folks. Also, try using that business terminology we went over instead of the internal language. It does help smooth the transition into a partnership. We've also seen misunderstandings in many companies about people with disabilities in general, which is why we advocate and train as many hiring managers and leaders as we can with our clients to get beyond the fears and stigmas that people have of those with disabilities still to this day. You may run across this with employers you talk to, and it's important not to settle. If you or the individual aren't comfortable with the company, I would encourage you to pass on them and try a more inclusive company. Kevin, I'll throw it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Keith. So let's be honest. In the business of finding meaningful employment for people with disabilities, it's a challenge, and it takes special people to be successful in those roles. So let's talk about distrust that can really arise from a variety of different scenarios between organizations that serve job seekers with disabilities and the employers that are trying to hire. Maybe you've experienced some of these firsthand. Perhaps you've tried to work with a business before and it just didn't work out. Maybe they registered for a career fair and they no-showed on you. Maybe you sent over a resume and no one responded. Perhaps one of your job seekers was even hired there and you had an awful culture experience. Or maybe you've heard from colleagues that this company is not the right place for people with disabilities to work for. And maybe that you said that, as we hear at Disability Solutions, maybe you heard before that they said that they don't hire people with disabilities or people with disabilities can't do their jobs. These are things that we hear. So what do? You always don't consider this employer and really steer people away from them or or definitely use them as a last resort. So it's not really the place you want to send your job seekers. On the flip side, we hear from employers all the time who've had bad experience hiring people with disabilities. We hear this all the time when we kick off new project with our employer clients. Maybe the company attended a career fair on the other end and maybe a resume workshop or something like that. And it was either poorly planned or poorly attended. And, maybe they weren't welcomed. They didn't feel welcome there. That's valuable time wasted on their end. Or maybe they've heard or been part of someone who accused them of discrimination and put them through some unnecessary legal issues. All these issues we've heard and these events definitely lead to mutual distrust between the two organizations and definitely prevent the shared goal from being realized. So let's take a look at the big picture in disability employment. That really is. Sometimes each side ends up spending more time listing grievances or why they can't work with each other when a better solution really is available. Each side can lose patience and throw in the towel too quickly. So you want to make sure you're being persistent, understanding, and keeping this big picture in mind. There are some companies that you don't want to work for, as Keith mentioned, and that is absolutely fine because, again, some companies aren't quite there when it comes to inclusion. There are also companies amazing at inclusion and that are written off as possibilities due to some of these reasons of the past. Maybe John from your company, from 5 years ago, got into a spat with HR professional at that company over a long forgotten reason, and that just carried over to today. Businesses legally, again, need to get out there and attract and hire people with disabilities, and the good ones understand that the opportunity really is amazing. People with disabilities have an employment rate of double the population of those without. So there's an opportunity for businesses to tap into this typically untapped pool of talent. People with disabilities also have a higher retention rate than those without. Again, opportunity and a profit for business. Community organizations succeed by finding great places to work for these job seekers, and in most cases, you get paid for successful hires and outcomes. So that is the big picture. You both benefit from what you have to avoid the roadblocks to get there. Keith?
Thank you, Kevin. So what can you do to help disability employment beyond what you're already doing? Here are some additional steps that you can take. The first, know the business. We touched on this a bit earlier, but you and the job seeker need to have a comfort level with the business and the jobs that they have available and do some good research. Too often, too many job seekers will maybe apply to 10 jobs a day and without looking much at the company or looking much beyond the job title. And they'll kind of kick back and wait and see who reaches out to them. And sometimes they'll go into interviews with either no knowledge at all of the company or very limited knowledge of the company and the job and just try to wing it. Also, if you're a community organization and are invited to the company to see the facility, please, we encourage you not to take it too casual with what you wear to the event. We'd like to say that you are sometimes that company's only visual of disability recruiting. So if you view it that way, you'll be able to help many more people than your current caseload. And also ask good questions, and good questions would revolve around how many people are you looking to hire? Do you need people all year long? And questions that encourage an ongoing relationship beyond kind of like a, hey, I'm going to find you one hire type scenario. We would encourage. Also understand what the business wants. So you are a talent partner. You have talent looking for positions, and the employer has positions that require talent. You also represent a population that has a high unemployment rate and has a lot of people looking for work. We already mentioned that that is opportunity in the employer's eyes. People with disabilities tend to stay on the job longer, which saves companies money. Companies are also after employees, and not interns in most cases. You may have great programs along those lines, but you could lose companies when you hit them up front with that information. You may be better off establishing that relationship first by finding some great employment matches or continuing the conversation, and then you can comfortably propose your programs. We help employers sometimes host community partner meetings where we invite some organizations into the employer's facility. We have a Q&A session with hiring managers and HR leaders, and almost every event, the very first questions are statements from community organizations kind of telling the company about intricate internship, employment programs that the organization has. That's absolutely great, but that can sometimes overwhelm a lot of employers and can hurt things before they even start. Which takes us back to the big picture. Remember that if the employer is a federal contractor, they need to hire people with disabilities. They need you. 7% of each job group needs to be people with disabilities. You also need to, as much as possible, play well in the sandbox with other community organizations. For most companies, one community organization can't supply all of the talent that they need on an ongoing basis, and we've kind of seen some pretty intense turf wars over the years, which end up helping no one. But there is room for everybody. There are tremendous amounts of companies hiring, even today, given our current circumstances, and you can expand your relationships and work with other companies. Relationships also take time. There's no magical switch. You need to fight through those initial communication and misunderstandings and keep moving towards that common goal, which is disability employment. Kevin, I'll pass back to you to wrap us up.
Thank you, Keith. So again, we have a common goal here, Disability Solutions and the wonderful employer partners on this call today. We all want to increase disability employment, but we need your help in addition to the help of employers. We value your partnership, and if you work for a community organization helping job seekers with disabilities find employment, we do send out some, every 2 to 3 week job alerts for our inclusive employers all across the country. They have helpful company information, what that company is all about, links to their jobs in our career center, and links to helpful free webinars for job seekers and partners alike. If you'd like to be added to this, again, please feel free to reach out to us after. Quick review. Again, we went over that evolution and brief history of disability employment, let you know why companies need to hire people with disabilities. We went through the reasons why community organizations and employers usually fail to make that lasting connection. And we gave you some tips to bypass some of these obstacles to make better connections with businesses and help us and you increase disability hiring across the board. We do have a next webinar coming up with our job seekers. We're doing interview tips and mock interview trainings. We talk about some behavioral based questions and how to answer them. And then we do some mock interviews with the job seekers who would like to share their resumes and time with us. That's August 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can register at disabilitytalent.org/jobseekers-events. So at this point, we're going to put our contact information up there. If you want to reach out to us again to join our job alert list, or if you have any questions and you got to run, info@disabilitytalent.org will get you to us directly. That's our website, and that's the career center where all our jobs are posted from our employers. With that said, let's throw it over to Q&A. All you have to do is hover over your menu bar, hit the Q&A button, type in your question, and we'd be happy to answer it. And we have a few already. So it's a good one. If an employer is not following ADA, specifically with the language they used, how can we point that out without creating friction and ruining the professional relationship? This is a good one because obviously every relationship is different, but it's really in education is really important when you're working with employers. Again, education with the different types of disability, the talent value out there, and the ADA specifically. Again, a lot of things are handled at headquarter level. So if you're working with like a large company and a local site, they might not be as knowledgeable as they should be around the ADA and some other policies and procedures. So the best way to handle this is kind of just give them that education. You don't want to call them out or tell them they're doing it wrong. Maybe just refer back to the ADA, that language you're talking about, if they're using actual language. Refer them that maybe that's not correct, and this is actually the way you want to look at it, and kind of educate them rather than correcting them. I think that would be my best advice, not knowing all the details around it, but really try to focus on the education piece rather than saying you're doing it wrong. Let me correct you. More of like the ADA actually says this, blah 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 blah, so on and so forth. Anything you want to add to that, Keith?
Yeah, thanks. That's actually great knowledge that you have. I would say it's all about the delivery. So, if I were to go to one of my friends and say, you know what, you really stink at this, and I begin the conversation with that, that wouldn't go very well, and it probably wouldn't affect the change. However, knowing the individual and like the nuances of your relationship with that individual, being able to kind of work that into conversation in a non-preachy, like, hey, I'm here to help you out, I've kind of seen this, or somebody has seen this, is probably the way to go with that, because it's definitely something the employer wants to know because it could put them at potential risk, right? But it is also, about the relationship and the delivery too. So you don't want to like come across and, as a hammer and, sever the relationship, even though you're delivering valuable information.
Excellent. One question is, will it be available? Will the slides be available for reviewing later? We will. We have recorded this, and we'll put it on our website. Usually takes about 48 to 72 hours to get up on the website. Could be quicker, but you can find it definitely under our webinar resources, in addition to some other ones we have up there as well. So this will be available to listen to on the recording. Next question is a good one. I know a deaf person who worked as an intern for a small interior design company for about 6 months, and vocational rehab provided and paid for the interpreting services. But when the internship ended, she had the opportunity to work for them, but the company stated they couldn't afford to pay for their interpreting services. So there's a lost opportunity, as she really enjoyed working there, and his suggestions on how to approach this. Good one. So I have a couple examples, and Keith, I'll let you jump in too. But we worked with a large company who hired 2 individuals who were deaf and needing interpreters. And they went through the training, they onboarded with interpreters, which was great. But interpreters obviously can be very costly, and it was, ended up being close to $30,000 getting them up to speed in this new company, which is, it's not really reasonable if you think about it. If they have to pay for the interpreter to be on working for them at all costs, 40 hours a week or plus, can get very pricey. However, try to figure out different solutions. Again, we want to look at a reasonable accommodation. So in that prime example of working with those 2 individuals, those individuals would start actually teaching their colleagues signs at the morning meetings. And these signs were related to work things that they would have to talk about on the floor. So instead of, grabbing an interpreter or grabbing a piece of paper or grabbing something, they were able to relay using these signs and teaching their coworkers, which was really great. Also, we saw that in those same meetings, there was coworkers who would help and type for those individuals, so they would be able to hear what the manager was saying. They also started using iPads and different devices to see how they can communicate on the floor. Again, it's more of like a warehouse manufacturing facility, so they're able to use different devices and able to communicate effectively on the floor and be able to do their job. So kind of think outside the box of how that individual, again, for an accommodation, every individual is different, every job's different, every employer is different, but you want to make sure everyone's going through the same process to figure out what the best solution can be for both parties to be successful. You want the employee to be successful, you want the employer to be able to have a successful employee. So getting, thinking outside the box of how we can make this work, especially if it's a great opportunity and the person's a really great talent to that employer. Keith, anything to add, or is that good for you?
I would say on the flip side of that coin, she may have dodged a bullet. If I'm working for an organization, I want to, and I'm doing a great job, and I want them to invest in me too. And so, at that point, if an employer is not willing to invest or even go down an avenue looking for avenues where I can continue delivering great work for them, is that really the employer that I want to work for? Right? There's hundreds of thousands of employers all across the country, and in certain neighborhoods, and some are more inclusive than others, and it's sad to say sometimes we find it out with scenarios like this. So I would encourage you to kind of keep an open mind as far as looking for those companies, researching which ones are active in diversity and inclusion, which ones kind of match up with your values, and so it kind of avoids situations like this, but unfortunately they kind of show their cards, right? And so I'm sorry to hear that.
Great. Another great question on the job seeker side of it. When they are filling out the applications, some don't want to disclose their disability. Therefore, I would think that would be a disservice to both the job seeker and the company. What guidelines do you recommend? Keith, I know we do a whole nother presentation on this, but I'll let you handle this one.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. We say checking that box or self-disclosure is a personal choice. We advocate for it because we kind of see how the benefits are for companies, showing that they're hiring people with disabilities, but then also becoming kind of a pride play in our community to proudly check that box. And if companies aren't hiring enough people with disabilities or interviewing enough people with disabilities, the OFCCP can come in with an audit, and they'll use those numbers to put pressure to increase that with each company. But as I said in the beginning, it boils down to a personal choice. So if a person isn't comfortable with that, checking that box, that's certainly okay. And if they are, that's great too. But one of the common misperceptions or fears about that form is that it finds its way immediately with their application to the hiring manager or the person reviewing folks for the position. And that's actually not true. It's firewalled off, and very few people in the company can actually get it, and it's not attached to an application. So we try to lay the information out there, and it's a personal choice for the individual.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Again, if you have any more questions, hover over your menu bar, hit that Q&A button, type in your question. We'll be happy to answer it. Looks like at least one more. Do you have any do you have a info session on disability disclosure planned for the future? If so, where can I register for that? We don't have one planned. I believe we have one on demand though. So if you want to reach out to me at info@disabilitytalent.org, I will send that link to you. I believe we have that on our website, but I just got to double check that. Again, we do a webinar we actually do it for employers too, how to increase getting people to self-disclose, because that's a big topic around compliance. But we also do a webinar for job seekers specifically, when's the right time, giving them information about what Keith just said. It's once you check that box, it doesn't mean that everyone knows you have disabilities. It's really for compliance reasons. And then there's, when you need an accommodation, how do you disclose your disability then? And also kind of like public announcement of when you're comfortable doing it and bringing your whole self to work. So again, I'll get you that if you reach out to me. All right. Another great question. How would you recommend quote unquote cold calling businesses and asking them to partner with you? I can tend to feel awkward when wanting to start a relationship with a new company or business without having a prior contact. Do you tend to highlight that you represent individuals with disabilities when making that first contact? That's a good question. That's a really good question. I haven't got that one before. Yeah, so it is cold calling, right? You're doing the job, although your job really is to find people with disabilities employment. It really is. It's a sell, right? It's a sell of your organizations. It's a sell of who you are, and it's a sell of those job seekers that you're representing. So I really fill it out. I mean, if you want to not say you work with individual disabilities, definitely say you're a talent partner. You have you work with a lot of talent, and you can help get to their business, and you have probably some funding and resources that can help them find the right talent. So definitely have a pitch. Have a pitch of what your organization is about, who you are, and what kind of talent you are going to bring to the table. for that first meeting. I think there's a really good training or kind of thought process. I guess it's called 3 cups of tea. The first cup is an intro, second's getting to know more, and third is and so on and so forth. But it's a really good training for community-based organizations to start working with businesses. But yeah, definitely get out there. I mean, it is awkward because you're a salesperson, but again, get that foot in the door with saying you're a talent partner, and then that once you're in the door, talk to them about the things we just talked about. That talent value, the different types of disabilities out there, higher retention, so on and so forth, and be able to back it up with some good talent as well. Yeah, it could be awkward, but again, you are a salesperson selling what you do, so could be awkward, but just get out there, whatever works best for you, and your spiel will help you get in the door and be successful. Keith, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say also most companies have recruiters embedded within LinkedIn. And so I would encourage you to make connections with recruiters, folks in human resources on LinkedIn, and just kind of focus on what you have in common. You have folks who are looking for jobs, and they're after folks who can do their jobs. And so emphasizing that common connection, whether you work for an organization that has 500 folks looking for employment, that's going to catch my eye as a recruiter. Like, oh man, that's a great talent pool that I can draw from, and it's those conversations that can kind of lead you down the line. And even let's say, a company's hiring for like scientists or something like that, and you're like, oh man, I don't have anybody who could do a scientist role. I would encourage you not to close doors right off the bat, because what we've seen with community organizations and businesses is maybe 6 months down the line, you come across somebody, oh my gosh, she'll be a great fit, or she'll be a great fit for this role, and you'll reach back out, but then you've already kind of closed the door with that business. So it's always great to make connections, keep doors open, even if you don't have a great amount of talent. You will in the future, most likely, or the connection you make with the business knows people that have similar roles with other businesses that can kind of open additional doors for you. But I would encourage you to kind of start with LinkedIn, make those connections with recruiters, and emphasize that commonality with, I've got great talent and you're looking for great talent. Let's see what we can do.
Excellent. Got a lot of good questions coming up. Most employers aware that 67% of employee base is mandated to be veteran candidates. So with this one, again, if you're working locally, we tend to find out locally in HR, they might not have that information. Even hiring managers, for a lot of companies we work with, hiring managers aren't HR people. They're department heads who are hiring the talent for their department. They're not really cued in on the HR and the compliance stuff as much as they should be. They might have it on their interview paperwork, but they're not really clued in. And usually at a headquarter level, you got, the VPs of diversity and compliance and all this stuff. Sometimes it doesn't trickle down to a local basis where they understand that you're supposed to hire people with disabilities, and you need to be reaching out to them, you need to be reaching out to veteran candidates and getting those hires. And again, that also is it's a target. It's not you have to. It's like, I need these people, so I'm going to hire a person with a veteran just to get someone in the door. We definitely don't want that happening. But locally, so that's a good way to get in there. Again, with the question we just answered, it's a good way to get in there. To tell them about, hey, do you realize, what Section 503 is? Do you know what VEVRA is? Do you know about the compliance aspect of doing it? We can help you with that outreach. Even outreaching to the community is a huge step in the right direction versus getting down the line of hiring people. So again, good way to educate people walking in locally is to educate them on what they should be doing. Again, doing it nicely. You don't want to tell them, hey, you got to hire people with disabilities. It's more like, hey, we can help you and provide the service to you for free. So to answer long answer short is that most really don't know those things they should be hitting. All right, Nancy, I'm in the process of creating a disability diversity awareness presentation to share with employers. Are you aware of any PowerPoint examples out there? I would definitely check out our website, disabilitytalent.org, under resources. There's some for employers and there's some for job seekers and partners. Check out some of those on-demand webinars. We have some pretty good information when we're talking to employers and educating them. Again, changing minds, changing lives, changing minds, and it's the huge education part that we do for employers is really important. So definitely check those out. Are there some types of jobs employers that are more open to hiring individuals with disabilities? Keith, what do you think about that one?
I would say that, we get this question a lot from employers, what jobs can a person with a disability do, or what job should I focus on? And we say all your jobs, because, there are many different types of disabilities out there. And, a lot of organizations just want to pin it down to like, one specific role or anything. But we encourage, entry level all the way up to CEO. If there's an opening, a person with a disability can do that job. So instead of focusing very narrowly, we would encourage to just kind of every single position that's out there, be open to the idea that a person with a disability can do that job. And when you take that mindset and that approach, you're going to see a lot more opportunities appear than you would if you kind of focused on that, I'm only going to find people for customer service roles, or I'm only going to find people for, this type of role. So we encourage you to keep that broad approach and open mindset that a person with a disability can do any job open in the United States right now.
Yeah, agree. All right, last question. Follow up on one of the earlier questions. In our presentation, we mentioned diversity and inclusion and hiring people from a diverse background, and not specifically people with disabilities. So how do we identify recruiters on LinkedIn that do hire for people with disabilities? So honestly, we like to say, like to say it, but it's a fact that disability is kind of the forgotten diversity group. Kind of comes last when you're looking at your diversity plans. There's CEO pledges on their websites that often leave out disabilities in general. So I don't think there's a lot out there now. Hopefully it will be that are like just recruiting people with disabilities as far as recruiters. But what we were getting at is there is diversity within disabilities. So disabilities cover every ethnic group, sex, age, so on and so forth. So that's what we promote when talking to employers is like, hey, you're looking at increased diversity. People with disabilities are very diverse. They cover all diverse groups. So that's how we push that a lot is like when you're hiring people with disabilities, you're hiring all your D&I across the board, and you're going to increase what you're supposed to be doing. People with disabilities, again, we're making a huge not come back, but a big impression these days lately. So I think recruiters are getting out there and being more smarter when it comes to reaching out to organizations such as Voc Rehab and the Wounded Warrior Project and other organizations that serve people with disabilities. So that's kind of a tool for your tool belt when you're working with employers is, hey, people with disabilities have a huge diverse background. So that's going to increase everything, not just your disability metrics that you have to should be hitting. All right, I appreciate the great questions. If we didn't answer anything thoroughly, or you have some follow-up questions, again, just reach out, info@disabilitytalent.org. Again, if you're not receiving our job alerts for your specific area, definitely reach out as well. We really thank you for your time. Again, I'll leave our contact information up here again. Any questions, feedback, comments, good or bad, please reach out. We love to hear from you. We love to learn. We love to get better. So I appreciate your time. And with that said, I'll leave this up for about 30 seconds. And we want to thank you for joining today. And we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.